one of the things that I'd be interested for the three of you who participated is, did you have any surprises, like, huh, really? Or any ahas that you'd be willing to share with this group from the whole process?
Yeah, so I said towards the beginning that, in our session, you did something that sort of revolutionized my leadership life. And I don't think it's an overstatement of what happened. So, I'm a surgeon. I'm a perfectionist by nature, which is a good thing if you're a surgeon.
We all want you to be a perfectionist.
But it was a derailer for me in my leadership life. We talked about my cognitive assessment. We talked about my personality traits, and then you asked me sort of what my challenges are, in my day-to-day life. And I said, well, man, I'm bogged down with emails, and I'll spend hours and hours crafting an email response. I'll spend hours and hours working on a business plan. And I'll never forget the tutelage and the advice, which was my aha moment, that perfection is good for a doctor, but 80% is good enough for a leader, and that I was being paralyzed by this need to be perfect in my communication and in my planning and in my leadership life, and it was delaying getting the job done, and that in a leadership life, failure 20% of the time is expected and okay, and part of the way organizations and leaders and groups grow. And every single day, I remind myself of that. And if I'm doing my clinical work, I'm in my perfectionist mode, and if I'm in my leadership, I'm actually in my 80% mode, and it has really made a difference for me. So thank you for that.
Good. Thank you, Brad.
I was just going to, I commented on a little bit earlier on the positive side. I didn't realize amongst the group that I was really the change agent amongst the group, the one the most comfortable with change. And so that was very positive for me, because I thought, okay, this is where I can add value to the group. This is where I can sort of help us evolve as a team, is to get other people more comfortable with change, help with the change process, because we're going through a lot of change at Mayo Clinic all the time. And I was surprised that the group, collectively, we didn't have a higher tolerance for change. So when I kind of saw those results and we talked about it as a group, I thought, okay, that's really a role that I could play, and I still try to do that to this day. On the more development side, I was surprised. I've always considered myself as someone who thinks creatively, as a kind of a bold and forward thinker. I would have rated myself probably a 7 out of 10 on that. When I got the results back, all 6 of my raters ranked me 4 out of 4 on that. They ranked that as my lowest skill. And that was a bit of a surprise for me. As I said, I saw myself as higher in that. Not at the top of it, but certainly towards the top end. And what helped me with that is, the reason they rated me so low on that is because I'm very much an executor. I'm someone who gets things done. And because they rated me, every one of them rated me the highest on execution and ability to get things done, that I rely on that too much. I rely on my execution skills and getting things done and sort of connecting the dots, the how versus the why. And that was one of the takeaways for me, is to be able to step back and spend more time on the why and not jump into the how. And so that was one of the development areas for me that was a little bit of an aha, was this sort of disconnect where I saw myself and where others saw me. But the reality is, when I got the feedback and saw that, I thought, okay, this is honest and critical feedback. I need to take it to heart, and I need to change my leadership, as I said, to step back and ask more of the why, and not always just go to how we're going to get something done.
Mm-hmm. So it caused you to potentially show up differently as a leader, mm-hmm. Which is, different circumstances require us to show up differently as leaders, right? And so the best leaders probably have a whole array of possible options and ways that they can operate. And having this kind of process allows you to go, oh, I'm playing too much to one thing that I'm really good at.
Right.
So thank you for that. You were going to add something, Lois.
So one of my real takeaways was, like many people, I tend to be pretty exquisitely aware of what I think are my weaknesses, and that sometimes holds me back. And I sort of take for granted that the things I do well, everyone does well, so that's just not really, as much a differentiator. And so this was really useful to say, maybe I should lean in a little bit and not wait till I have 110% of the experience of other people. But when I have 90% of the experience, I can go for it. So thank you.
Absolutely. And you did at one point in your career when you went for it at the time that you were surprised to become the leader, so to speak. By going through a process where you learn a way of thinking about your leadership, does that now influence how you look at other people on your team in terms of their leadership? So maybe one of you could speak to that.
So I'll answer that very simply, yes. I think, especially in my background is my, formal academic training is a medical degree. So I don't have an MBA, I don't have any administrative training. And I do believe that this experience just sharpened my ability to understand leadership, not only for myself, but for those that I work with, and to assist them in being effective. So I think that there is quite a rich return.
I would say for myself, what it opened my eyes to is that because my focus in leadership has been historically on sort of operational efficiency, execution, driving results, I have surrounded myself with similar people. So when we look at our operations in Arizona, it's a very well-run machine. I mean, it really is, by all accounts. But
I'll vouch for that.
Yeah, you can vouch for that. What I don't have at my leadership table here are the bold and forward thinkers, the innovators, the visionary people. And we just had this conversation the other day. And we have a new CEO in Arizona. Our previous CEO retired, and we have a new CEO who's very similar to myself. He's a surgeon. He's an executor. He's a planner. We're gonna, you don't go into surgery to be surprised. And his leadership, his leadership is the same way. Like, I'm not gonna, I need to be prepared. We need to do all these things. And so now we have two sort of execution people in leadership. And I had this conversation with him, is we need to find those visionary thinkers, the bold thinkers, the creative innovators, and we need to surround ourselves with them. Because as we look at the next 10 years, it's going to be a different skill set that we need as an organization than the past 10 years. Our past 10 years has really been on growth in our facilities, growth in our practice, growth in our staff. As we look to 2030 in the new plan, it's going to be how do we transform what we do by doing it differently, by being bold, by being innovative. And so it's a conversation we're having, and today is about how do we not only change ourselves, but bring in talents that can push us in that direction as well.
I mean, thanks for that example, because we all know that it's human nature to like people who are like ourselves. And sometimes when I'm doing an interview, I'll put in the margin, be careful, you like her. It's like, because I won't do as tough an interview because I'm going to make some assumptions about what this individual is like, which may or may not be right. Brad, you wanted to add to this as well, Dr. Leibovich.
Well, I think that's a very insightful question, and I would say that 50% of the value that I got from going through this process was for me, and the other 50% was making me a better mentor, coach, identifier of talent, builder of talent from what I've learned through the process. So I think it's at least as valuable for the individual as it is for the individuals that person interacts with.
Need help achieving high-performance leadership? Let's begin a conversation.